the car so that you'd be forced to come back with the car to me on a different day.
We'll bring it back another time. Don't worry.
But I really loved the experience, from the quality feel of the interior, the quality drive. I know our roads sometimes are not the best for some of these cars, but I certainly found myself thinking, wow, I would really love to own one of these. It's 11 minutes after 11. That was the voice of Tafadzwa Nyabuta. He comes in from Zimoco as a marketing officer every single Thursday. Here we are, trying to help you understanding a little bit more about your car, the buying process, and even latest information around things that are happening. And I'm sure by now you've caught winds of the war that's literally just from nowhere unpacked in the Middle East, Israel, without, and this is a thing that's been making headlines. How did they miss this thing? Well, they did. And they've had a conflict between them and Hamas. The devastation that's happened, that I've seen, buildings literally burnt to ash. It is traumatic, it's disastrous, and we hope, as I saw a press statement that was released by our government of Zimbabwe, that this will be resolved amicably, and that truly we will not continue to see an unnecessary loss of civilian life. But that's not what this issue is about. You and I are no politicians, and we're not trying to get in that business. We're in the business of car, and yet conflict like this in the Middle East does have an impact on us in terms of fuel and cost. Talk to us and tell us why, Tafadzwa.
Exactly. So most people, find it's very unfortunate what's happening to the very far north of us, but it does have an impact on us and, in fact, the entire world. If you think about it, that region is very oil rich, which means there's a lot of refineries which produce the very crucial diesel and petroleum, or petrol, that we use in our vehicles. Now, when there's issues in regions that control a large amount of fuel that then filters down and comes to our markets, it means that there may be some logistics constraints, which means that there might be a little bit less fuel on the market, meaning that fuel costs can creep up a little bit, albeit temporarily, but they can creep up, which means it affects your pocket.
Yeah, have we started to see fuel prices escalating in this part of the world?
Well, we've seen a little bit of movement. It hasn't been much, but it is a result of what's happening up north. But definitely there is a slight change upwards. And again, every cent counts.
Oh, you have no idea what that statement means. I think it was last week we were talking about how there was a time where really $10 would get you almost 10 liters. $5, why it was not 5 liters, but at least 3 days I'll be okay. Now with $10 you're getting, sheesh, it's like you're almost pulling your hair out. And I think any slight disturbance in the fuel price, really, I think we'll all feel the pinch. But also, speaking to that subject, let's talk a little bit more generally about fuel efficiency in our cars. I know most of the times I'm one of those people, when I'm looking at a car, I want to know the capacity, like the Alfa Romeo. We're talking about not just the horsepower, but we're talking about the capacity of the engine size. Is it a 2.5? Is it a 3.2? Is it a 6-liter car? But that also has direct bearing as well on the consumption of the fuel. So stay tuned. Welcome to Under the Hood. We're talking today quite extensively, trying to understand a little bit more about fuel consumption on the car. I know a lot of people like to buy a certain kind of car because they say, it's a good fuel user. I want to know from you, what would be the car that you're driving at the moment? Would you say yours is economic or not? And is it something that bothers you? Or are you the kind of person saying, Folake, I want a V12 6-liter. I don't care what you say about consumption. I like the power. I like the performance. 0719-10404. What are you driving? Is it a fuel saver? And is that something that you're really thinking about?
Us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Capital FM.
So as I said, we're talking all things to do with the efficiency of our fuel consumption in our cars. One thing, Tafadzwa, I think you might also experience is when you are driving on our roads, going to work in the mornings, or 4:30, 5 o'clock, sometimes even around 6 p.m., there's a lot of congestion that happens on our road, and we find ourselves idling. Talk to us about, tracking fuel consumption when the car is idling.
Well, that's a very good question. So, you know what, when it comes to fuel consumption, a number of things come into play. And I like the subject or the example you brought up, which is idling in traffic. Very important consideration. So, when you're idling, essentially, your engine is still running. It is still using fuel. It doesn't shut off.
Yeah.
Well, smarter cars these days actually shut off.
The Alfa Romeo does that, right? Like
Exactly.
when you hit 0 and you're by the traffic light, it goes quiet.
Exactly.
And then when you just press your foot side, it goes.
Exactly. That's the engine starting up again. So the reason why some modern cars do that is for the reason we want to talk about today: fuel efficiency and saving fuel. So manufacturers have put this feature in because the world is getting more conscious about the amount of fuel people use. Yes, it is a resource that will eventually, at some point, run out, which is why we see a trend towards electric cars coming up. But we digress. Let's come back to fuel efficiency of the cars we see on the roads more often. So in an idle situation, your engine is still running and is still consuming fuel. So of course, the longer you stay and wait, fuel is being used unnecessarily, just keeping the engine turning, basically. And you must also appreciate that when we're in traffic jams, we're using more of our low range gears. That's gear 1 and gear 2, which are very heavy gears. These gears are meant to get the car going. So generally do use a bit more fuel to get the car moving. And that's why you find that in traffic jam situations, when traffic is bumper to bumper, your fuel dial tends to want to run down a bit fast.
Yeah. So are we bad people, for those of us who don't have smart engines, to actually put your car into park and then actually switch it off when you're about to start moving? And then you start moving.
Well, the first thing to do is not to switch off your engine. That's the important part. If you're driving an automatic car, just shift it into neutral and put the handbrake on, relax, put some music on, listen to radio, and be happy. The reason why you choose
Neutral, not park.
neutral, not park. When where you can put it into park if you want to. Neutral though just makes it easier to go into drive. Just it's a shorter throw into drive. And it achieves the same goal essentially. But if you're going from park down to drive, you go through a few different gears. It plays on the air of wear and tear on the vehicle. And you know, sometimes when you can do something right, even if it's a small thing,
Do it
why
right.
not do it?
I love
so
that.
put it into neutral and put the handbrake on, achieves the same goal, but you're closer to getting back into drive when you need to move. The reason you shouldn't shut off your engine is that starting up a car actually uses up quite a bit of fuel. People don't know this. So getting the engine turning is quite a very laborsome thing for the engine. So to do that, it needs to use a bit of fuel, and that also translates to a few more milliliters being used that should not otherwise be used, if you can avoid it. So put the vehicle into neutral, put the handbrake on, listen to music and relax, and then put your engine on.
Right. And if you are driving a shift gear car, is that the same?
Same thing as well, into neutral and handbrake on. What you shouldn't do when you're driving an automatic car is leave the car in drive and maybe put your handbrake on or step on the brake. The engine is still in go forward or go backwards mode if in reverse, and is trying to push the car forward, which means it's revving slightly higher than normal at neutral, and again that leads to more fuel being used unnecessarily. Who doesn't want to save money?
Who does not want, especially on fuel? I mean, would you not have an extra drink rather than? But anyway, that's just Folake talking. So talk to us about the size of the car. Does that have anything to do with fuel consumption when you looked at? Does it necessarily mean if I have a smaller car versus to these 300, 200 H6s, and you've got an H12 as well? There's something like that, right? Does it have
Oh, it's called a Tank 300 and a Tank 500. Big machine.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. A Tank 300. Would a Tank 300 consume more than, say, the H1?
Well, 100%. When it comes to the type of vehicle and the size of engine, the number of cylinders, and of course, if you go into the engine, if you're talking about V configurations, V8s, V6s, size definitely matters when it comes down to fuel consumption. And they don't just make these cars for the fun of it. Yes, there are some designer cars or some very, I'll put it out there, outwardly cars that have massive engines, massive torque, massive power and performance. The use case is really for a thrill. But when you talk about the ordinary vehicle most people drive, let's talk about the size of the engine and the size of the vehicle. Those cars are made specifically to match up with a certain size of engine, with a certain number of cylinders to achieve a certain goal. So obviously an SUV that is big and heavier will have a very big engine to deal, one, with the weight of the vehicle as it is, to give it enough power to drive and perform in the functions it's made for. SUVs or double cabs are generally made for going off-road or have the capabilities of going off-road. So therefore, you must have a sizable engine to deal with that. Fuel economy does not matter there. What matters is what it's trying to achieve. Now let's go to the other end of the scale. You have smaller cars with 1 liter engines. Sometimes you get 0.8 liter engines these days. All the way up to 2 liter, 2.5 liter, paired up with 4 or 6 cylinders. Those vehicles are also made for a certain purpose. Small engined cars, 1 liter to about 1.5 liters, are made for fuel efficiency and made for roundabout driving. So that's driving to work, around town, errands, school runs, going back home, and it should help you achieve all of this using the least amount of fuel. Then you have the middle tier, which is your 2 liter to about 3 liter vehicles. Those are more, have performance, but some element of fuel efficiency mindedness in there. But they're made more towards the performance. So it's an entry level performance. And then of course your bigger engines, 3.5 liter, V6s, V8s, those are all performance driven. They will just use fuel regardless. Their function is to drain the fuel tank dry to give you performance.
And I know people who do this, right? It is a tiny stretch, like a 40-meter stretch before they hit a traffic light, but they just want us to turn our heads because they're stepping on the gas and the guy goes vrrr, and there's a vrrr,
exactly.
You know, and we're all looking, they're also equally guilty. They're in this WhatsApp group as well. So Baru, we've seen you. The list is endless. You know the people I'm talking about. So you're saying the size, we started talking about the car size, and now you're explaining the size of the engine and what that does with the fuel consumption.
Correct.
So in simple terms, and then you started talking about the V6s and the V8s. When the more liters a car has, the what?
The more fuel it generally uses, or the more performance or power output a car generally has, which generally means it tends to use more fuel.
Right, and this fuel is doing what to the engine capacity?
That is, so let's just take, for example, I think examples will make it nice and easy. Let's just take for a double cab, for example, that works out somewhere in Zimbabwe on a mine. So this vehicle works in a very rough environment, very demanding environment, one where you have to scale obstacles on the road, deal with very harsh road conditions. So if you put a small size engine in that vehicle, say a 1 liter engine in that vehicle, it will not do very well. In fact, it probably lead to engine failure. Reason being that engine is too small to allow enough power to be generated by the engine to traverse very difficult terrain or road.
Right.
But a big engine provides that power that drives the wheels around these obstacles, keeps the vehicle going. And that's the reason why they make them that big. It might need to pull a very heavy load behind it, or it might need to carry some things in the load tray to get to the mine or get to supply wherever it's going. That reminds a bit of power. That power comes at a cost. The cost is fuel efficiency.
Okay. It's Capital 100.4 FM, Harare's Heartbeat. So, it looks like, just from what you were saying, size sometimes is everything, right? And it's clearly sometimes it's not just about the car size, but sometimes car size is everything. We want to know from you, if you are driving a car, would you say your car is fuel efficient? What's the engine size, and what's the car size? For you, what's your experience? We want to know from you. And did I tell you that Capital is having a breast cancer family fun day?
Get ready, it's coming. The Breast Cancer Awareness Family Fun Day on Saturday, the 14th of October, 2023 at Stephen Magwalis Resort. Proudly brought to you by Capital 100.4 FM at Stephen Magwalis Resort, number 625 Stephen Magwalis Road, off Chitungwiza Road, Waterfalls. Meet breast cancer experts and learn more about early detection and screening. Admission is $5 for adults and $3 for children aged 3 to 12 years, and children get into the kids' play area absolutely free. Bring your family and friends and meet some of your favorite radio personalities. Enjoy lots of thrills including zip lining, horse riding, speedboat cruises, giant swings, and the giant swimming pool with water slides. 20% of all gate proceeds will go towards breast cancer treatment at Nyabuta Hospital. The Breast Cancer Awareness Family Fun Day. Join us as we raise awareness of breast cancer. Stephen Magwalis Resort, an adventure and leisure paradise.
Get up, get going. going and get to Summer Splash 3rd edition on Saturday, the 21st of October 2023 at First Capital
F1 or
Bank
something.
Sports Club,
F1,
Harare,
yeah.
from 12
Yes,
noon
we saw the
till late.
Can't use
Celebrate
much,
the
it's
summer
all-
with the whole family in
Yeah,
style.
no,
Loads of
not much
entertainment
not
for
much
the
excitement
kids,
right now.
summer games, tasty food,
Alright.
and drink.
Are you able to
Shopping
speak into
stalls,
that?
music,
Yeah,
a
F1. I can talk about the last
whole
race. Yeah,
lot
okay,
more.
go. Now I got that.
Bring your cooler boxes. Admission is $5. To
There was,
book your stall, call
Hamilton gets fined 50,000
781-5555.
Hamilton gets
Now,
fined 50,000
Summer
euros
Splash
for
3rd
walking
edition
across the
is
track.
proudly
Oh,
brought to
when it's
you
car
by
crash.
Capital
Let's talk about that.
100.4 FM and
That's
Chicken
the
Basket.
interesting one right now.
Summer Splash 3rd edition. Fun for the whole family.
Under the hood.
That's right. As always, every Thursday, we are in our overalls in some sense, and we are looking into our cars. And today we'll be looking at fuel consumption, particularly inspired by the changes or the conflict that's happening in the Middle East and how that does have an effect on fuel prices. We are seeing a slight bump up in terms of fuel prices, but also there was some exciting stuff that happened as far as F1 is concerned. We have, as usual, a new addition to our Under the Hood panel. He is Tafadzwa Nyabuta. He comes from Zimoco. He's the marketing officer. Talk to us about the fines that happened in F1, Tafadzwa.
Oh yeah, it was a very exciting week. Unfortunately, bad news for us as Zimoco, as our flag bearer in Lewis Hamilton had a bit of a ding with his teammates. So that's 2 cars out, and then which caused him to actually retire from the race, and he did not finish, which left the doors open for Mark Verstappen to come first. Then we had the Ferrari second, and then of course the McLaren in third. But very interesting with Lewis Hamilton, because he was fined €50,000 for leaving his abandoned car and walking across a live racetrack, as they call it, even though it was under safety conditions. So they found very, very much on that.
Yeah. Do you
and
think
they
he
fined heavily.
do you think he did that knowingly, or he really was emotion frustrated even in that moment?
I think it was something that happened without him thinking. I think maybe it was, listen, you are a very competitive person if you're a race car driver, particularly in Formula One. So everything is buzzing. The adrenaline is buzzing. You've just had an accident, which you have caused, unfortunately, and he did own up to that. And it meant that you can't compete a race you were hoping to win. So in that moment, maybe you're not thinking, you probably know the rules at the back of your head, but you decide to walk across anyway.
The cost of that accident and that fine, the 7-time world champion was fined, you said €50,000.
50,000
So who
euros.
pays for that?
Well, it's a fine that's directed to him. So it's interesting. It's a very good question. Does he pay for it, or does the team take one for the team? Literally. So we're not quite sure. But the long and short of it, a fine has been put down, and €50,000 will land in someone's pocket.
And also in terms of the cost of losing that race.
Yeah. So of course, it's damage to the
the car.
vehicle. Let's talk about the ultimate loss, which is of course the loss of points, or the ability to score some points, which puts you, I guess, on the ladder a little bit higher than maybe you want to in terms of scoring. I think it's safe to say that Red Bull right now is really running away with it. We did have a discussion about it last week. Their car is doing very well. But second place is first loser. You always want to try and claw as many points as you can to get up the space. Nobody wants to be second. You always want to be first.
Of course. Second is no way attractive. It is Cafe Talk 100.4 FM, Harare Zapi. We're talking also about fuel consumption efficiency on our cars. Something that Clayton, when he's here, Clayton Green, we hope you get well soon. Something he's always pushing in as a mechanic, naturally, is that we should take our cars in for maintenance, for service. Changing the spark plugs, the filters, sometimes the brakes, depending on what level of service you're doing. But how does this affect fuel efficiency, if at all?
100%. So think of an athlete who's getting ready to run a marathon. If you just get out of bed, put your shoes on, put your shorts on, and start running, you won't perform as well. You'll be very tired. You might have to sit down a few times during the race. And that's because you're not operating at your best. You haven't given your body enough time to prepare. You haven't put the right food inside you to give you the amount of energy you need to go forward. And of course, you will be tired as well. So same thing applies to vehicles. A vehicle that has an engine that has maybe a lot of maintenance issues, it's not maintained very well, lots of things that need replacing but aren't, strains to provide that power to drive the wheels. And that extra strain comes at a cost, and the cost is always fuel. And of course, a hefty bill in your pocket, because not only will you use more fuel, but you will incur a higher maintenance bill as well if you leave those things that should be routine too long.
One thing that I also love about someone like Tafadzwa is he's the kind of person who comes bearing gifts almost always. So last time it was the Alfa Romeo. Today, I have a feeling you brought something with you.
Well, we're talking about cars, the engine size and capacities, and which is why I always refer back to double cab vehicles. Today I brought the Mitsubishi Triton double cab, which is of course one of the best 4x4 and 4x2 vehicles operating in Zim at the moment. Very robust engine, being a 2.4 liter, and a vehicle that one must consider when they're looking for applications that are very work oriented.
Work oriented. So if you're does Mitsubishi have I don't know if this question is going to make sense. So do they have a class where it's not just work? I'm talking in terms of the bikies, where if I do want a bikie where I can enjoy it as a family guy and get a bit of work out of that. Is that dreaming?
100%. In fact, the same car, the same applies. So with any model trim, any model rather vehicle, there is also always generally with double cabs and single cabs, the entry point, they're workhorses. Let's not beat around the bush. Those are vehicles made to work, meant to go into fleets for companies, meant to do very hard work. So you don't have lots of fancy things, electronics and whatnot, to get in the way of maintenance, to increase the cost unnecessarily, and but still achieve the goal. Of course, on other scale, there is the glossed up version, which have very comfortable seats, your lane departure assist, your extra airbags, ABS, and so forth and so forth. So it does cover everything. You find that people who want to be comfortable, there's an option for you.
You were mentioning ABS there, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Mitsubishi's anti-lock braking system. Why is that an important feature?
Oh, it's important not just for Mitsubishis, but for any car in terms of safety. So what ABS, or how it works rather, is that when you slam your brakes down in an emergency situation, using all the technology, that means that your wheels tend to seize up completely. That takes away control. So you can turn the steering wheel left, right, center, the car will go whichever direction that the skid was initiated on. So it gives you no control. So with ABS, what it does is very clever. It moves a bunch of pistons when you slam down your brakes, and it opens and closes the brake caliper very quickly. Most people don't realize it, but they've probably heard ABS in their vehicles. When you're in the gravel, or you press the brakes hard, you hear a rattling noise. Not a broken rattling noise, but it sounds like something is coming loose on the brake pads themselves. It's actually the brakes holding and letting go very quickly, about 10 times a second. And what that does, it allows the wheel to turn slightly, but still come to a gradual stop.
Right.
But ultimately gives you directional control. So you can actually steer yourself out of an emergency situation. So a car in front of you slams the brakes on very hard. Let's say you have ample braking distance, and you slam the brakes on, but you find that maybe, for whatever reason, as an example, it's a car with very good brakes and stop very quickly.
Right.
This is yours. The brakes are fine, but doesn't have as good braking distance as the one in front of you. You have to avoid it.
All right.
ABS will help you steer around it.
I think it was the GWM we were talking about last time, about how in terms of engine capacity, it came in, I think, just the 2 liter, I think we said.
Correct.
I wanted to know, in terms of the Mitsubishi, because we're talking about fuel consumption, does it have different capacities, and what's its fuel consumption like?
For generally, you're finding that it's 2.4 liter diesel engine. Again, what you're finding with the motor industry as a whole is that they find the sweet spot for an engine for a certain application or for a certain type of vehicle, and they generally stick to it. Yes, hatchbacks, sedans, yes, SUVs have a bit more range when it comes to your engines, and that's for specific reasons. But you find in your double cabs and your single cab models, for the Mitsubishis, you're looking at a 2.4, or a 2 liter if it's a 4x2, and a 2.4 liter if it's a 4x4 model. Again, the 0.4 makes a difference for 4x4. When a car is moving in 4x4 with all wheels in drive, it's using a bit more fuel. And with that application, you do need a bit more power. So that extra oomph in the engine does help. Fuel efficiency as well. The fact that it's bigger, it does come down a bit lower. You're looking at we use the combined cycle, which is generally gridlock driving to open-end driving, and the combination of that is what comes up with this figure. you're looking at about a combined fuel rating of 1 liter of fuel should comfortably take you about 10.5 liters as a rule of thumb.
All right. It's 11:36. We're talking all things to do with our cars today. We are looking at fuel efficiency, but also we're looking at the baby Tafadzwa brought us. It's outside, is it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Ready for a drive.
Yeah, I'm certainly ready for a drive. And more importantly, we are live on Facebook right now, but also we're going to film that also for your experience so you can have a feel of what that looks like. And remember, you can actually go to Zimoco and test drive for free as long as you've got your license. And I know we had winners just before I fell ill of people who actually could go to Zimoco for test drive, and that will still happen. You certainly will get the opportunity for you to go and enjoy a test drive of the cars that they have. And of course, I know, and I know you said, that those are one of the cars we can't test drive because, they are already pre-bought. Imagine somebody's, if no, my plastic.
It does. Wrapped around in some cases completely wrapped.
Wow, with the bowl. Music of one of my favorite local musicians. She's been on our show recently, actually, as she was celebrating the release of her new book, her new collection of poetry. This one is Hope Masike. Idenga. Does your car give you that feeling?